Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in 2023, week 45. That's November 6th to November 12th, and we are going to be starting on the front end. We're going to do some work on making it so that our front end can clear and get installed properly. So we're going to start by taking the rad out of the car. Now that the rad's out of the way, I've got some marks on those front bars, and what I'm going to do is use my torch, heat them up, and beat the snot out of the front bars so that it clears the bolts on the actual front clip that goes on. So I've already undone some of the wiring so that, I'm not going to melt the wires when I heat up this pipe, because we're going to get it red hot and beat the snot out of it. I start by using a piece of the tubing, but that piece of tubing just ends up bending. So I switch over, I grab an impact socket, and I beat the hell out of it after. So we're going to do the same thing on both sides. We're just going to heat it up, beat it with the impact socket, heat it up, beat it with the impact socket until I think it's cleared. Now, I should have done this next part before I started beating on the front end, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the coil mounts off the car and take the coils off the car, undo the wires, and just kind of get it really out of the way. So I'm just getting the welder set up here, and the reason why I'm getting those coils out of the way is I'm going to do some welding on the car. So I still have some more of the weld on wiring tabs that I want to do on the front end. I didn't get those all done before. So now that I've got my MIG welder, which will make this process quite a bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and get all of the tabs finished off on the car. So I actually lied. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill up these rear bolt holes for the rad. And the reason for that is I need to tilt the rad back so that the front end will clear. So easiest way to do that is I'm just going to use a piece of aluminum as a backer, and then use the MIG welder, fill up that 3/8 hole. And then after that's done, when I get the rad back in there, I can mark a new hole, and away we go. Alright, so as it turns out, I'm not going to be installing those weld tabs right now. I think I do that later in the video. I thought I was doing it now, but I kind of misremembered. So we're just filling up those holes for now, and we're going to do a little bit of cleanup here real quick. Alright, so now that that's done, we can get the rad just loosely mounted in with 2 bolts, because obviously those front bolt holes were filled up. And what will happen is this will just kind of lean forward and lean against the car, which is totally okay. I'm alright with that for now. Since the point of this exercise is to clearance the front end so that I can get the front clip on, I'm going to go ahead and put the fenders back on the car and put the front end back on the car and make sure that I got all that spacing correct. While I'm doing this, you'll notice here that the fender's not really going on properly. I'm having a bit of difficulty with it, so I got to play around with the Pro Charger intake pipe a little bit. Alright, so with this front clip on, the fitment was actually looking pretty good. It wasn't hitting on the bars, although my marks and where I kind of beat in the front end was a little bit off. It's not perfect, but for right now, to get the car on the road, to get it going, I'm kind of okay with it. I'm just going to leave it, and then I'll figure out what to do later. I might replace those front end bars again, bring them back a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. But for the moment, I'm not going to stress about it. We're just going to keep on keeping on and get the car on the road. So at this point, I have checked clearancing on the rad. It's angled where I want. I'm happy with that. The front end's mounting up, so I'm going to pull the front end all back apart. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill new holes for the rad mount at this new angle. With everything all marked, I can pull the rad back out and drill the holes. So with those holes drilled out and cleaned up a little bit, just gonna do a little bit of shop cleanup here. All right, so now I'm getting back to the weld on tabs. So I've just broken it off the bunch that I have, and I'm just cleaning up all of the edges with a file, and then I'm going to weld those onto the car. I knew I was putting them on in this video. Apparently I just forgot where I was putting them in. Yeah, this is so much nicer with the MIG welder. It still kind of deflects the arc a little bit, but I'm able to get it on there, and then once I pull the magnet away, it welds just beautifully. I am so happy with how easily this happened, and I'm just going to re-add some tacks to the other ones, just make sure that they don't go anywhere. And I absolutely love the mobility of this welding cart. I can just move it around, move it sideways, just super easy to get around. After a little bit of pondering there on the car, I'm just going to throw some zip ties on all the tabs and get the wiring kind of back into place. And with that, since I've got those tabs there, I'm going to start doing some of the wiring on the front end of the car. So, you know, I don't know why, but I've been procrastinating on doing the wiring for the lights on the front end. It doesn't make sense, but I have been, and now I'm just going to start doing it. So in order to do that, I'm going to put the fenders back on. I need to put the front end back on. And from there, I can see where I'm going to run this bundle of wires and where they all needs to go. So in the fender, I have a marker light that needs to, one of the wires goes to the marker light on that side. I've got a wire that goes to the marker light on the passenger side. And then I've got the high beam, low beam that I need to wire in. And of course I need grounds for all that. So this is my new socket for this fender. And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up running a ground wire from the chassis to that socket. And then in parallel out of that socket, I'm going to run ground up to the low beam, I believe it is. And then in parallel, run a ground out of the low beam into the high beam. Oh, I also have a turn signal down on the bumper that needs to get wired. So I think I end up running ground to the marker light to the signal light up to the high beam or low beam light, and then ground over to the high beam, I think. But yeah, so I do some wiring on the driver's side. I get it to a point where I'm kind of happy with it. And then when I go over to the passenger side, I run it differently and I'm happier with it. So I eventually go back and redo this on the passenger side. So that's what I'm going to do right here, is get all of that started. So with the front end all back together, I can kind of loosely figure out where I want all of the headlight wiring to go. One thing that I need to do is I need to know which wire is the high beam and which wire is the low beam. It's not actually labeled low beam, high beam on the wires. It's just they're both labeled headlight. One is red, one is a brown. So very easy to do. Get my multimeter out. One end of the multimeter goes on one wire coming out of the front end. And then on the harness itself, I can pin out the wires, and I know which one is the output of the high beam and which one is the low beam, and I know that because I can look at the headlight switch harness that goes up into the steering column, so I can see which wire goes up into the steering column, and the just default pass-through will go out as headlights, and then the other wire is high beams. So I think it ends up being brown is low beam, the red is high beams. I don't remember. But that doesn't really matter all that much. What I'm doing here is I'm just getting like the wires that go to the front just loosely to their area and cut them down short because they don't need to be super long. So I do that with the marker light, I do that with the turn signal lights, and then I also do that with the headlights. And the thing is, there's a single headlight and or single low beam and a single high beam wire. So what I have to do is cut it roughly to length on the driver's side, and then I just daisy chain it out to the passenger side. So right now what I'm doing is I'm pulling out my new headlight kit from RMS Lighting just to, make sure that I'm doing things correctly, that I have all the right connections, that everything's going to work, and just to, understand how this is all supposed to work. Yeah, everything works out fine. I got everything I need. So I've written on the front end which one's the high beam, which one's the low beam, and you can kind of see the low beam actually has 3 pins on the back of the bulb. The high beam only has 2. So the low beam is going to get ground, a low beam signal, and a high beam signal. So the way it works is the low beam signal, when you turn the headlight switch on, is going to go to the low beam, and it'll be the low setting of that headlight. And then when you pull the high beam switch, it also sends power to the second pin. So, or does it switch? I think it actually switches. It removes the power from the low beam, pushes it out to the high beam, and all 4 lights will be lit up when the high beam's on, but when you go back to low beam, only the outside lights will be on. Now that I've got the wires loosely where I need them on the driver's side, I'm just going to run some ground wires and get that all sorted out. With the driver's side kind of figured out, what I'm going to do is pull this front end back off, and then from there what I can do is I can start bundling the wires, just taping them together and getting them run over to the passenger side and figure out where exactly I'm going to run those. I think I'm going to run them on the bottom of the front end, tube front end bar, but you know, I can just do a little bit of work, get this taped up for now. So I started running this and I thought to myself, oh crap, I need to run a ground into here. So I very quickly take my bundle and I start wiring a ground in there so that it can go from, you know, the driver's side over to the passenger side. And here I'm kind of just thinking to myself, do I really need to run a ground all the way across, or can I just have grounds on two sides? Because there really shouldn't be anything wrong with that. So I pull that ground out and I just keep on wiring the powers, and what I'll do is I'll have a ground on either side attached to the, you know, one of those 4 bolts for the tube front end. Passenger side will, you know, be a ground for the passenger side, driver side will be ground for drive side, and away we go. So now it's time to take the tube front end, put it back on, and then I can zip tie all of the lighting wires to it and, you know, figure out how long it needs to be, where it needs to go, etc., etc. Well, first I need to put the front end back on and see if I can wire over top or below and find out where the air gaps are or where the gaps are, so it's not going to be rubbing against the front end. So in this video you can see I got a lot of room on the bottom, not too much on the top, so very easy. zip tied to the bottom. And what I will eventually do is I'll take those zip tie weld tabs and I'll weld them onto the bottom. That way there's no zip ties along the top and you won't even know that it's how it's being held on. It'll just be very nice, very clean. So from here, what I can do is I can start running the grounds and start figuring out all of the marker wires and the turn signal wires and, you know, the headlight wires on this side. Yeah, this right here is a absolutely fantastic camera angle. I am so thrilled with this. So once again, I got the front end back on just to figure out exactly where wires need to go, how long they need to be. I can do some rough cuts and then continue on. So I'm just grabbing out all the pieces that I need. So I have some connectors and all the terminals for the headlights, and that right there is one of the marker sockets. So just kind of checking to see if I can repin it and just direct wire into it. But I eventually decided on another method which I don't have the resources for right now. So Just doing a little bit of cleanup here in the shop. And now I'm redoing all of the grounds on the driver's side to mimic what I did on the passenger side, because I did like how I did it on the passenger side. So that green wire that I'm wiring right now is the horn wire. So the horn needs a ground. Well, now that I think about it, typically the horn would ground to the chassis. Anyways, I'm going to run a wire, and then if I need to pull it off later, I can do that very simply. So with the grounds run, I'm going to go over to my connector collection and see if I actually have the connectors that I need to, do the wiring for the marker and the turn signals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire it in with a DTM2 connector. And I don't have any of those right now. So I'm gonna have to wait, order some with all the pins needed, but I've got a plan for it. So what I'm gonna do is power and ground is gonna go into the first DTM connector. That way I can just unplug the connector, pull the fender off if I need to, or undo the connector, pull the front end out. Like, it makes it very, very modular and easy to take everything apart. But yeah, so from that DTM connector I'll go into another DTM for the turn signal, and then that'll go up to the regular headlight connectors. What I'm doing right now is I am just looking for the old headlight wiring harness, because I want to figure out which wires on the headlight's ground, which one's low beam, which one's high beam, etc., etc. And with the harness I can very, very easily do this. So I plug the low beam in, and then that'll jump over to the high beam. So that tells me which is the high beam connector on the low beam headlight and which is the ground. And when I plug this into the high beam, I know which is the high beam. So if we take a look right here, we have the bottom pin on the low beam, which is green, and that actually connects over to the high beam. So that means that the low pin on the bottom pin on the headlight on the low beam harness is what connects over into the high beam. And then I can very easily see which is the ground, and that means I know which one's the low beam. So the low beam, I believe, is the right pin on there. The high beam was the bottom pin, and the ground was the left pin. So I know that now. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to connect to my battery and very quickly test out the high beam just to see if the polarity matters. Like, does it matter which one's ground and which one's high beam? And it looks like it doesn't. So I can wire that however I want. It doesn't matter if I get the pins reversed. But I kind of have a feeling as to how this harness was connected, so I can figure out which one is ground, which one is the high beam wire. So from there, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to wire in the low beam sockets. There's the 3 pins, there's the ground. So ground will have 2, the high beam will have 2 because one needs to jump over to the high beam bulb, and then there will be a single wire for the low beam. And we're going to take a quick little break because Answer came in the shop for a visit. So that's Answer right there. And now that she's done her visit, we can get back to work. Alright, so what we got going on here is, I've crimped the wires for the headlight harness. I've got that connector done, for the low beam, I should say. Just kind of tying up some of the wires. And I'm going to wait until I get all of the connectors to do the marker lights and the signal lights and all of that before I continue on. I also need to put the new headlight, what's the word I'm looking for here? The headlights housing and bulb in, because I have this front end on and off and on and off and on and off, and it's not stable right now. It's just kind of sitting on the floor, so I don't really want to put all the new stuff into it in case I kick it or smash it or something like that. But I will probably do that pretty soon here, only because I need to test it, make sure it all works. But with that, let's do a little bit of cleanup. And we got carburetor in the shop for a little bit here. So what we are going to get onto now is wiring for the heater valve. So I've had these wires run for a long time, but I finally want to get to actually putting the end on and then plugging it in. There's no reason why I can't do this. I've just been procrastinating on it. So yeah, let's just get it done. It took me multiple hours to find this connector and the proper crimps and be able to find where I could buy it. Like, it's not something that's just easily available everywhere. And when I bought it, you could only buy 5 at a time. I was like, okay, whatever, let's do it. But I think they sent me 10. So I actually have a ton of spares, which I'm okay with. Just knowing that I was able to find it so that I don't have to splice these wires. As you've seen in all my videos, I don't splice wires unless it's 100% absolutely required. I do my best to find the connectors, find the pins, and wire directly into the device. And as we've seen a bunch, let's pull this front end apart. So something else I've been procrastinating on is the suspension, or the steering I should say. Right now the passenger side tire to my naked eye looks like it's towed out, and that's because I don't have enough thread on the inner tie rod in order to tow it in all the way. So we're going to jack the car up and we're going to do some more work on the front suspension. So what I'm doing here is I'm just turning the wheels all the way left, all the way right, checking clearances in the back and the front, making sure, you know, I'm not hitting control arms, I'm not hitting the wiring, I'm not hitting the fuel lines, all that stuff. So I'm just kind of checking all that stuff out, making sure we got space everywhere we need it. So one thing I noticed while I was working on doing the toe-in is that the threading on both the inner tie rod and the outer tie rod are both the same thread. So usually with tie rods, what you do is you twist the black part and there's opposite threads on either end. So what'll happen is as you screw it out, it'll either extend or retract. But that's not what's happening in this case. So in my mind, I'm like, well, maybe I got these on the wrong side. So let's just switch these sides and see if that fixes it. It didn't. It was completely wrong. So yeah, it's just kind of weird that the threads are the exact same on both ends. Because yeah, usually you would just twist on the black piece, and then that would, with opposite threads on either end, it would extend the toe. So it's kind of weird, but whatever. It doesn't change anything. I can still work with this. So, a problem that I mentioned is that I cannot tow in the passenger side tire enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a die and I'm going to extend the threads on the outer tie rod. If you'll remember, I already had to cut these down. So these are SN95 tie rods, which would work on the later model Mustangs, but I've got a Fox rack in here still. So I'm just going to have to modify these tie rods to make them fit in this application. The SN95s, I believe, have a slightly wider track width and maybe a narrower rack. So that's why I've got to modify this as much as I do. I think I could probably get away with buying an SN95 rack and then the tie rods would have worked just as they were. But here we are. These are the things you got to do. Just go into the instructions to find the torque spec for those bolts again. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually disconnecting the steering shaft from the rack. And the reason why I'm doing that is what I want to do is center the steering wheel again. So I had centered it before, and then when I was checking it out, the tie rod was actually hitting the control arm, stopping it from properly centering. So yeah, I'm just going through, recentering the wheel, and then I will get that with the rack centered, and then make it so that when the steering wheel is straight, the wheels are straight. So with that, I put the wheel back on, and I'm just kind of using my eyeball to tow the wheel right now. And from my eyeball, the toe looks okay. It's not horrible, and once it's flat on its wheels, it'll probably have to be adjusted more. I'll actually take it to a proper race shop to have an alignment done, but at the moment, just for sitting in the shop, it's good enough. So after a little bit of pondering, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of work getting all of the wiring kind of tied up under or in the wheel well here, just to make sure everything's going to fit, the wheel's going to clear, etc., etc. All right, now that those things are done, I'm gonna start working on some front end brake lines. This is something I've needed to do for a while. Again, I've been procrastinating on it, but I finally got the motivation. Let's just get this going. Let's get it done. So that's just some Nycop brake line, and I'm just gonna run it from the front wheel well down across the K-member and up to the other side. It'll be just kind of hidden and a little bit cleaner instead of running it up on the firewall, I think. But one of the things that I need to do before I actually run that line is figure out where my line lock is going to go in the wheel well. So what's going to happen is I'm putting loosely putting the front brake line on the driver's side caliper, and that's going to tell me how much range of motion I have in that wheel well and where I can put this line lock. So the way it's going to work is there's going to be a line that goes into the top port, and then two lines are going to split out of the bottom to go to the passenger and driver side calipers. So the first thing I need to do is figure out placement of where this is going to go, and that placement is predicated on where I can put the driver side brake line, because I'm just going to have it come straight off of here. It's going to be in the line lock's going to be in that area, so might as well have the brake line go directly into it. So we're just jacking the car back up to get the tire off, because this next bit of work is going to be way easier without the tire in the way. What I'm doing here is I'm zip tying the brake line just to the frame rail, and the reason why I'm doing that is so that I can test moving the wheel all the way left, all the way right, and just make sure that I'm not going to be putting excess tension on the brake line. And you can see it kind of works. It can go all the way left, all the way right's not 100%. It's not great. I don't like it, but it does work. Obviously the line's not staying too tight. It's getting a little tight there at the end there. I'm not in love with that. But I can put the line lock, right there on that outer frame rail, and should work pretty darn good. But before I mount anything, I want to put the tire back on and just make sure everything's going to clear. And what's happening is the brake line would be rubbing on the tire. So That position is no bueno, not gonna happen. So I've tested out a few different combinations and none of them are really good. So this brake line ultimately, as you can see here, it has to go down and then it'll have to come up and into the line lock, which is fine. That actually works quite nicely. I'm not too upset about that. I think it's going to work beautifully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the line lock onto that outer frame rail with a couple of 1/4" bolts. Right, now we know what we're going to do. It's just a matter of doing it. So let's center punch some holes, drill, tap, and mount that line lock. What I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to figure out exactly which fitting goes into here, and as it turns out, it's a 1/8 NPT. So I'm going to have to get a 1/8 NPT to -3AN fitting for that front brake line, but this just, lets me confirm that is the fitting that I need. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we are going to make a brake line that goes from the output of the master cylinder to the input of the line lock. So the first thing we're going to start there is just putting a normal end on it, and that'll be our starting point. So now what we're looking at is the bottom of the master cylinder. We're looking from the bottom of the car up. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to get this fitting installed inside the master. Alright, that took quite a bit of work, but we finally got it in, and what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to take measurements how far back I need to go, how much down I need to come, and from there I can put a couple of bends in this line. And with those two bends, I'm going to go and do a quick test fitting. I don't show this, unfortunately, but I'm just trying to check out and make sure it's kind of going where I need it to go. And from there, we are just going to continue bending this line until we get it through the cross member and then up and into the line lock. Alright, so we're going to give you a bit of a better shot as to what we're doing. So it goes down out of the master, follows the inner frame rail, loops around the frame rail between the K-member and the frame, and then comes up, and it'll go up and into the input of the line lock. Just to get that line kind of situated and a little bit more firmly in place, we're just going to drill out a hole, tap it, and put a line clamp on there. And with that last fitting, we have a brake line from the output of the master cylinder into the line lock. So with that done, we can now move on to making a line that's going to go from the output of the line lock down the cross member and across to the other side, and then up and in for the passenger side brake line. So we're just going to throw a couple of zip ties around here just to kind of get it roughly held in and where it needs to go, so we can do some bending and get it into the line lock. So this is the original line that I had for this line lock when I had it on the car before. So the fitting is very tight. I couldn't get a line wrench on the brake line fitting, so I just clamped it in the vise. It's brass, it's super soft. I didn't care if it bent or broke or got teeth marks on it. What I really need is the fitting, and now I'm just going to clean the fitting off a little bit before putting it back into the line. So that's pretty much where we need it to be. That's decent. And while I've been under the car, I've noticed an oil leak. So the oil leak is coming from the one of the oil pan fill plugs. So since I've got this new dipstick, my plan is I'm going to pull that old plug out, put the dipstick in, and, you know, get the dipstick installed and fix the oil leak all in one shot. So I get the old plug out, clean up the area a little bit, and when I go to put the new dipstick in, I realize that the fitting on the dipstick tube is smaller than the fitting on the oil pan. Oh, that sucks so much. Because this just isn't gonna work for me. Yay! So yeah, I throw it in there, and then I realize, yeah, just isn't gonna fit. So with that, I am just going to put the old plug back in, but I'm actually gonna put some tape on it, so hopefully it doesn't leak this time. All right, that is all the time we have for this week. So as always, if you've stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and we'll catch you in the next one.